Now that interest rates on I-bonds have dropped, does that mean that you should cash in some of the ones you've already bought? That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of Friends Talk Financial Planning. Hi, I'm John Scherer, and I run a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. And John, before we go any further, let's ask people to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Hit a like, too, if you feel like it. But the subscribe helps us reach out to more people and helps people find our content. Okay, John, so I'm really excited about this topic.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are wondering about it. Okay, so the interest rates on I-bonds has gone down, so people think, should I sell?
Right. And it's interesting that going back a couple of years now when we first started talking about I-bonds, rates were sky high, right? It made a ton of sense to do. And now you're in a position where things like CDs or treasury bills, short-term instruments that have some of those guarantees like I-bonds do, are getting the same or even better rates, right? So what do you do with the ones you bought? How do you make that decision now? And for me anyway, I think it really comes back to, like a lot of our financial decisions, not trying to figure out what action to take, but trying to figure out what our goals are. What are we trying to accomplish with this? And then let the actions fall from there. And what I mean by that is there's sort of two places, I think, where people purchased I-bonds. One is if for somebody who is just looking for interest rate arbitrage, right? Hey, rates are really low. Fancy word, isn't it? Right? You can sound cool when you talk to your friends and say, I did interest rate arbitrage. Right? Interest rates were higher on I-bonds. You go, listen, here's a place to put some money that you're going to earn a little bit more than what you can get in the bank or CDs, right? And if that was your only goal, now you take a look at it and you go, okay, less appealing these days than it was even a year ago. The other side of it, that for people, I know we've got a lot of folks that have been in this position, is, the I-bonds are inflation bonds, right? It's protecting against inflation. And if protecting yourself against inflation was the real driving force for you, and if you're of a position where you think, golly, it really freaks me out as we see prices that have gone up so much over the last couple of years, I want to have some of that cash reserve money tied with inflation, then that's maybe a different point. Maybe the exact interest rate you're getting right now is not the driving factor, but having a buildup of a pot of money that's going to keep you, ahead of inflation is more important than what interest rate you're getting today.
Yeah, and I think that also thinking through the total implications of selling is important. First of all, let's talk about some pragmatic issues. You have to have held it for a year.
Right.
Okay.
Great point. Right. If you haven't even held it for a year, you have no choice.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So you have to have held it for a year. And if you haven't held it for 5 years, then you lose the last quarter being 3 months of interest when you sell. Okay. The other thing is that you don't want to get ahead of yourself. So the interest rate, you want, even if you're just buying it for interest rate, if that's the arbitrage was your point, you want to hold on to that thing as long as you're getting a higher interest rate, right? And so that can be, depending on when you bought it, remember that if you buy I-bonds on the last possible day of the high interest rate, then you get that for the next 6 months.
Right.
Or else, and so it might be like you think, the interest rates, I just heard the interest rates have gone down. But when you actually purchased it, wasn't the first possible date that you purchased it.
Right.
It was 3 or 5 months later. So you might as well wait those 3 to 5 months and actually look at, okay, what interest rate am I getting right now?
Am I getting, not what new people are getting.
Not what I hear in the news. So
that's really awesome.
So you might want to just wait a bit. Even if you are going to end up selling them, you might want to, let me hold out till I get the end of this interest rate.
Use up that, and that's a really super point. It's not just what the current prevailing is, what's your rate that you're getting on that.
Right.
The other thing, as you brought up, thinking about the whole picture, is if you've owned your I-bond for some period of time, one of the great things about I-bonds is that the interest grows tax deferred, right? So you don't have to pay any taxes on that. When you do sell an I-bond or cash it in, you have to pay taxes on that built-up gain.
Yeah.
If you've owned it for you can't for 6 months, you've owned it for just over a year or 2 years, right? Not a ton of interest perhaps built up. If you've owned an I-bond for 10 years, maybe there's a pretty big tax bill that's coming, And just because the interest rate now may be lower than what you can get other places, when you factor in the taxes and your personal situation, right? I'm still working, and in 5 years I'm not going to be working, and maybe I'll be in a lower tax bracket. Like, applying that personal side of it and being mindful of the taxes is a big part of that decision too, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Another thing is that if you take out your money, so right now you've got this whole IBonds setup, with the inflation protection. And so say you had 40,000 that you took out. But then the whole environment turns out to be similar to what it has been.
Right.
High
It circles
inflation,
back.
yeah, exactly. And so you can't put that money back in. You got to start again from your first initial investments.
Right.
So it's not like you once you take the money out and you stop you pay the tax, etc., then you can't get it back in. You have to start again.
Well, because there's a limit. You can only buy $10,000 per person per year.
Yeah.
And so if you had $50,000 in a CD, let's say,
Right.
now you're supposed to go, listen, I'm going to move money out of this CD and put it into this other investment because it's better interest. Well, if the winds change, I can just take the money out of the other investment and put it back into a CD, right?
Right.
You can't do that with iBonds, right?
Right.
You can only I take out 50,000. Now I want to go back. I can only do it in chunks of $10,000,
Right.
right? So you've got some limitations there, and I think for that reason's why I tend to look at things and to be slow. To be slow to sell or slow to cash those out. Not that I don't think that people should, but that we kind of look for a reason. Do we have to sell, sort of a thing? Is it reasonable to leave them in there longer? Is sort of the default that I've taken with it.
Yeah, and I actually I've come to grow fond of iBonds now because I think they're a really nice tool in specific situations to hedge against inflation, but also they generally kind of get the prevailing rate anyway, usually. So, all right, you've got, it's like an investment that's got an extra added bonus on it with the inflation hedge. And so, especially in situations where people are nearing retirement and we generally set up CD ladders or bond ladders in those situations. It's kind of a nice alternative to a CD ladder, or in addition to a CD ladder.
Yeah,
it's like it gives you kind of basically a couple rungs.
The other thing that we talk about a lot with our clients is taking a look at the actual dollars that we're talking about, right? And and as you get to having $50,000, $100,000, maybe if you've done this over a period of years, right? 1% is a pretty significant amount. If maybe you've put in a $10,000 over the last couple of years, if there's a 1% difference in interest rates, and I've got a $10,000 iBond, that 1% equals $100 a year of gain or loss, sort of a thing, right? And again, if I had want to give me $100, I'll take it. But how much are we actually getting if I go, listen, my iBond, I can get an extra 1% in a CD, another investment. What are you really getting? And then what are you giving up on the other side, as we're talking about? Listen, we can't just turn around and buy them back again if the winds shift with inflation and things. And so looking at what the dollars are, if you've got bigger dollars in there, it's a bigger decision. If you have less dollars in there, maybe it's a smaller decision than what it might feel like, right? We all want to get the best returns and the best gains on things, but looking at that, what does it mean in dollar terms, can be a helpful tool.
Yeah, and it's hard to predict the future. Like the reason that iBonds went out of favor or just under the radar for so long is because we're really at very low inflation.
Yeah.
Right? Or even had some deflationary periods. Now that actually is not that normal. Usually there's some, and I think that even the Fed is really aiming, like their goal is 2% inflation, a little bit of inflation, shows that things are chugging along and growing. So having that as, again, one of the tools makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But maybe if you're the person that bought it saying, oh, no, I love high interest rates. I get a lot of satisfaction out of high interest rates. The higher, the better I'm in. And I'm going to use this money either to fund my wedding, to buy my house, or something else, or I'm going to then put it in treasuries, and then after treasuries aren't the highest thing anymore, then I'll put it in the next investment that's paying a little bit more. And I have a history of I put it in this bank, and this bank, all because they had different higher interest. Like, you love the interest rate game, great, have at it.
Right.
Great time to sell.
Right.
If again you look at all the details.
Right, right. Looking at, and I think the big thing to circle back on is just what are your goals, right? And you just described, I love that, like there's different things that appeal to different people.
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish? Not what, and oftentimes the question is, what should I do? But before you know what you should do is that you should figure out where you're trying to get to, and then back into that idea of what is there to do from that standpoint.
With that is a great time to wrap it up. I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Scherer. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. And both Bridget and I are taking on new clients at our firms. But if you're looking for an advisor in your area, we're also members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners. And if you want to find somebody who thinks like us but maybe is more local to you, you can check out acplanners.org.
And please hit the subscribe button.